Hello and welcome to this week's installment of TRP News, a weekly production of the United States Rational Progressive Party. I'm your host, James Andre. This week we're going to be talking about the Iran negotiations, Medicaid funding, Hillary Clinton, and another edition of Why Vote. First up is the Iran negotiations. You've probably been hearing a lot about this week, especially considering a certain Senator Tom Cotton's letter to the Iranian leadership. The Iran negotiations are being conducted. The topic is these are the P5+1, which is the Security Council of the United Nations, and the topic is comprehensive agreement on Iranian nuclear program. The P5+1 is the U.S., Russia, China, France, the United Kingdom, and Germany. So the current deadline for the negotiations to be complete and for an agreement to be reached is this year, July 1st. Now that's the deadline. Who knows if an agreement's actually going to be reached, but that's when the United States says that there has to be some sort of understanding about the nuclear program. Now, you know, Bibi was here speaking to Congress and by default the rest of the United States talking about not having a bad agreement. And essentially what Israel or Netanyahu is saying is that they don't want Iran to have any nuclear program whatsoever. Now, Iran already has a nuclear program. They already actively work with nuclear physics and nuclear production of materials. And so I don't know if he wants that all to be removed or what his stated intention is, because as I stated before in previous weeks, the alternative is either an agreement with Iran or war, and that's basically the two choices. So they already have production of nuclear materials. A lot of countries do have production of nuclear materials or purchase them, are allowed to purchase them through the international market for a lot of reasons. Medical reasons, for example, various sorts of medical instruments and that kind of thing do need nuclear materials in order to operate. And but the big sticking point right now, one of them is the Iraq nuclear facility, and that's ARAK. And what is going on with that is there's two things that you need to make a nuclear weapon. You either need enriched uranium-235 or you need plutonium. Well, this is not a simple task, enriching uranium to the point where it has to be something like, I don't know, over 90% pure, enriched, purified, in order to make an effective nuclear bomb. Well, the Iraq nuclear facility can also produce plutonium, which does not have to be enriched and can be used as a nuclear, as part of a nuclear weapon. Now, the thing about enriching 235, that's not very easy. You know, even you've heard of North Korea testing weapons and unsuccessfully. It's not an easy job to do. It takes a lot of work, a lot of centrifuges, which is one thing you hear about, them limiting the number of centrifuges in Iraq to limit the possibility that this uranium can be enriched to a certain point. But plutonium doesn't need that enrichment. However, it does need to be separated from the spent fuel rods of a nuclear facility. So again, still not another easy task. It takes special facilities, and right now with Iran cooperating, there's really it's very unlikely that they could get away with doing this sort of work without anyone knowing, without us getting the heads up, and especially since they seem to be cooperating at this point. It's kind of premature, all this hubbub about, oh, we don't want a bad nuclear agreement. Well, we don't even know what the agreement is yet. So, you know, I don't know what the critics are criticizing, except to bang the drums of war, to stick the finger in the eye of the president. But everything is going pretty much as planned. Iran has said they aren't trying to create a weapon. They do need, for medical and agricultural purposes, nuclear materials, and that's why they have the programs that they have. Now, you know, obviously they could be making up a story or not telling the truth, but that's where we are right now. the Iraq reactor, is intended to replace the life-expired Tehran Nuclear Research Center. So this research facility, this nuclear facility, was built in 1967. So reactors have a life. They have to be commissioned and decommissioned. So they already have had one since 1967. So going on 50 years, and now it needs to be decommissioned, and now they need a new facility for whatever purposes they've had. So they've had this facility for 50 years, and there's no reason to think they can't peacefully have another facility. So that's the state of affairs right now. July 1st, as I said, is the deadline, and we will see what happens. But so far we have cooperation. We don't have any reason to doubt what they say. And again, it's a huge leap from just having nuclear research facilities to actually producing a viable nuclear weapon. Which brings us to what you've probably heard a lot about this week, is the GOP letter to the Iranian leadership. And this letter was authored by Senator Tom Cotton. Okay, he's a freshman senator, right? And he decides to send this letter explaining to the Iranian leadership that, well, you should understand how the Constitution works, and the president will just make an executive agreement. It's not a treaty, and we aren't bound. Once the president leaves office, that things could change. And so that, you got to be careful about what you do and understand. And, the letter really was really kind of just insulting on one level and just silly on another level, just because, number one, there's no need for a treaty here. This isn't about a treaty. This is about an agreement and understanding a way for Iran to prevent sanctions, which is within the purview of the executive branch, so that a treaty has nothing to do with this, really. And not only that, this is the P5+1. This is not just the United States. So for him, a freshman senator, to come and say, the United States, or the United Nations Security Council, P5+1 just came up with this agreement, and now I'm telling you as a freshman senator that, we may not live up to it. Number one, it's just sabotage, as some people have put it, and it's just silly. In addition to that, because you can't just. How are we going to look? What sort of respect will we have if we don't live up to our agreements, not only against Iran, but with our allies who are working with us trying to resolve this issue? And not only that, as I said at the top of this, it's premature. We don't even have an agreement to criticize yet. And everyone is expressing concern, bipartisan concern, about what type of agreement and how enforceable it will be. So this is not something that really needs to be stated, and not something that needs to be thrown in the face of the Iranian leadership. So now a lot of people are saying, this is a violation of the Logan Act. These people are traitors, they're criminals, they should be arrested, locked up. Well, okay, so what is the Logan Act? The Logan Act is basically a law that was written years and years ago that says that unauthorized people can't negotiate with foreign countries. So the president, the administrative branch, is the one that is authorized to make treaties and make agreements with foreign countries, and no one else should go do that. Well, this law, first of all, it has been noted by at least one judge. It's said that it's most likely, the way it's written, not constitutional because of the way it restricts speech and the vagueness of the language, number one. Number two is that the State Department has interpreted this law to not include senators who they say, as a senator, it falls within the execution of their duties that they are actually authorized to talk to foreign heads of state and foreign governments. So, and then the third thing is that it's never really been enforced. It's not something that people choose to enforce or try to enforce. There's been some threats made in regards to it, and over the years, but nothing has actually ever come of it. And so this Logan Act business is really just red herring and a lot of rhetoric and a lot of hyperbole. They haven't really violated the Logan Act, and in fact, if you read the text of the letter, it seems to go out of the way to not tread on the Logan Act's language, because, as I said at the beginning of this, it's kind of silly, it's kind of patronizing, and it reads as like an education of constitutional law and policy making in the United States, which is not really a negotiation with a foreign power. It's just sort of blathering, sort of idiotic nonsense that really has no effect, and no one's really giving much weight. In fact, this Tom Cotton tweeted the letter to several Iranian Twitter accounts, and on top of that, he tweeted, in case, quote unquote, in case you need a translation, he tweeted it in Farsi, as if they couldn't translate from English, or somehow that it would get lost, some of the meaning would get lost in translation. Well, the funny thing about that is, one of the main people doing the negotiations for Iran is Mohammad Javad Zarif, who has an undergraduate and a master's degree from San Francisco University and in international relations, and another master's from the University of Denver. So don't forget, Iran and the United States have ties that go back a long time. So a lot of these people are actually educated in the United States. They've lived here. They understand the law. They've studied here. They know what's going on. They don't need to be preached to about American policy and the Constitution, because they understand quite clearly, and trust me, during these negotiations, if there's something they don't understand, it's being explained to them. So this whole letter is just a ridiculous attempt to basically scuttle the negotiations. But not only that, it's an attempt to sort of get in bed with Israel and the defense military-industrial complex. How do we know that? Because number one, just after this letter comes out, Senator Tom Cotton goes and meets with the Legislative Information Division of the National Defense Industrial Association, NDIA. So what is the Legislative Information Division? Well, these guys basically have meetings with legislators and discuss upcoming legislation, changes to legislation, proposed legislation. So they have a nice cozy meeting and a chicken dinner or whatever, and then that ends up influencing our lawmaking. This is one of the biggest lobbies there is for the military and for the defense contractors. They have 31 divisions and 7 industrial working groups, and what they do, quote unquote, is the divisions maintain close contact with representatives of appropriate government agencies, and through their constructive counsel have become institutions in American defense industry relationships. So they basically are, as I said, a lobby, and they have all sorts of groups and all sorts of meetings to talk to legislators and get them to do what they want to promote the defense industry. They call it war fighting, to promote the use of the most modern technology for war fighters. It's all wrapped up in this strong and patriotic language, like we don't want to send our military out there with inferior equipment, but it's all about basically keeping the defense industry afloat, keeping them making money, keeping them profitable, and that's billions of dollars. And as I said last week, just the Israeli officials were here last week or 2 weeks ago, and they were asking for an additional money on top of their already yearly stipend that they get from the United States. Why? To build more defense systems, which 50% of the money will be spent here in this country with these very same defense contractors. And if you think about this connection, this just gets so murky, and the money is just flowing. It's internecine flow of money that's going from one pocket to another pocket, and everyone's got their hand in each other's pockets. So the U.S. is giving money to Israel, and Israel is giving money to the defense contractors. Defense contractors are meeting with Tom Cotton, and Tom Cotton writes a letter to Iran, basically throwing a wrench in the works of a peaceful negotiation. So how does that all sit? That doesn't sound very good. It doesn't sound very clean. It doesn't sound very right, at least not to me. And then you look at the U.S. supporting Israel, giving money to Israel, and then Bibi coming here and basically saying, we have a problem, and there's going to be a bigger problem with Iran if you end up negotiating and making a bad deal with Iran. Well, then in that case, that's why we need more money, so that we can spend it in Israel and we can spend it here with defense contractors. And the funny thing you should know about Bibi is that for his election campaign, now there's strict campaign financing laws in Israel, but most of Netanyahu's campaign financing, 90%, comes from the United States, from 4 families. So most of his money is coming from here to support him over there, so he can come here and try to get us in a war over there. So now, of course, you're probably hearing, and maybe we'll talk about this next week, I'm not sure, but he seems to be in trouble. Everyone's saying that speech at Congress was a miscalculation, and he is far right, and he seems to be looking for war and for conflict. And there's some unsavory things he said about Palestine and the negotiations going on there, and the one-state solution basically being dead in the water. So this guy is not someone who's working for peace, for peaceful resolution of anything. And people are starting to see that, and I think a lot of Israelis are starting to see that and realize that it's damaging their relationship, the Israeli relationship with other nations around the world. So we're going to see how this goes. Their election is happening, is going to happen very soon. July 1st is the deadline for these Iran negotiations. The blowback on this Tom Cotton letter is pretty strong, especially considering that there was some bipartisan negotiation trying to make sure that there was a Senate influence on the deal, the agreement with Iran. So, both sides, as I said, were looking at this and making sure it was a good deal, and until this guy comes, a freshman, and throws a spanner in the works and sticks his thumb in the president's eye, backs Israel, who comes over here and talks crap about us making policy. And so now we'll see what happens. Everything's shaken up. But bottom line is, the deal's supposed to be done July 1st. We don't have a deal yet. So when it comes down, I'm sure it's going to be something we all can live with. Not only that, it's not a treaty, as I said, because a treaty goes on probably in perpetuity. Whereas this agreement is supposed to be for, 10 years, 15 years. That way we see, okay, for 10 years, do you live up to your agreement or not? If you live up to your agreement, then we can have a new understanding at that point. So there's a time limit built into it anyway. So this is all a bunch of a hullabaloo, a bunch of much ado about nothing. And when it comes down to it, we're going to make sure that there is no nuclear proliferation anywhere if we can help it. And no one wants to see that. So this is not a partisan thing, even though some people are trying to make it that. And, when it comes down to it, I'm sure we're going to have a decent agreement. If nothing else, it'll be a temporal one that we'll be able to have some checks and balances and know what's happening down the road as we go. And nothing's going to be written in stone. So if something goes wrong, we always have the same options on the table. Okay, so that's what's going on with that right now. And next up is Medicaid funding. So this year, especially you hear a lot about this in relation to Florida, the government has historically funded the low-income and uninsured people, basically giving money to facilities like hospitals and nursing homes, covering their costs so that they incur while treating these people who are uninsured or who have low income. And as you know, or you may not know, the law requires that if someone's in need of medical assistance, you provide it. So what this Medicaid program does, the LIP, low-income persons fund basically covers those costs. Well, last year, the Medicaid the state of Florida had an agreement how we were going to handle this. We would take these funds, and this is how we're going to use them. And there was an agreement, basically what they call a waiver, that was for 3 years, and last year they only renewed it for 1 year. So now that funding is up for grabs, and you may hear people saying, "Oh, the Obama administration is playing hardball with Medicaid funding. They're trying to get Florida over a barrel." Well, that's not really what's happening. They told these guys last year, they only renewed the waiver for 1 year and said, do a study, figure out other ways to provide these funds, to deliver these funds, because this program is going to go away. Number one, the ACA was supposed to take care of this. The Affordable Care Act was supposed to take care of this. Medicaid expansion, we'll give you money, we'll cover these low-income people, and here's money to expand your coverage for these people. So those people would have been covered under the ACA to the tune of about $5 billion a year. Well, these guys are saying, it's like 1.3 or 1 to $2 billion a year. Right now they're getting through the LIP, the old Medicaid program. And they're crying and saying, we deserve to get this. We need this money, don't take it from the poor people, that kind of thing. That's what Florida's saying. Well, the administration's offering them twice as much money, but all they have to do is expand Medicaid. Well, their excuse is, we don't want to get stuck with the bill like 5 years down the road. You say expand Medicaid and you'll fund it, but then we're worried that 5 years you'll change your mind and not fund it. Well, folks, that's not the way things work. No representative, okay? How hard is it to get anything passed through the Senate, right? You think Florida senators are going to go up there and let someone yank the funding for expanded Medicaid coverage? It's not going to happen. And not only that, they're still taking money. They're still depending on money through the LIP. So what difference does it make which program they're depending on that money from? This is why this whole silly right-wing lack of thought thing that has been rampant in the last decade. It's just completely irrational. You're already relying on federal funds. So just go along with the program. It doesn't matter who came up with it. And don't get me started on how it was a bipartisan commission that came up with the ACA. But it doesn't matter if it was Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, or if it was Republicans or a Republican idea originally or a bipartisan idea by the time it was done. You still have to have those federal funds. People still need to be covered. People still need health insurance. So, just go with the flow, man. Stop fighting this. Stop being ridiculous. Stop being irrational. The program's changed. You don't want us to be stuck in the mud. You don't want us to be spending money unnecessarily. You don't want us to be using the least efficient program there is, or the most outdated program. That just goes against everything that Republicans supposedly stand for. Let's make it efficient if we're going to do it at all, or let's cut these programs. But they're trying to maintain it and hold on to it. Why? Simply because they don't like the president. That's what it boils down to. We don't want to do anything to support or agree with or get on the same side with them, to the point of turning down twice as much money for a brand new program, or even, as you may know, in Florida, turning down billions of dollars for high-speed rail, that people could have used in the state of Florida, but hey, we don't want to do that. So that's just the way, that's the state of it right now. So that is also coming to an end in this year sometime, and there's been lots of talk already. So this is not a playing hardball. This is not twisting someone's arm. They advertised this. There's been a study done in other ways. The administration's saying, look, expand Medicaid. You don't want to expand Medicaid? Then tell us how you're going to deliver these funds. And this program's going away, so you got to figure out a new way to do it. If you don't, we have a way to do it. You don't want to do it. You tell us a new way to do it. So that's what's going on with that right now. So we'll keep you apprised of the whole Medicaid funding issue. And all this is going on as a part of the Affordable Care Act and the Supreme Court case that I was talking about previously on a previous episode. So, that'll be more news that's coming, and we'll keep you updated. Another thing that was in the news this week was Hillary Clinton's emails. Okay, so I'm sure you've heard about this ad nauseum. So we're just going to kind of reel it in here and tell you a little bit about what it's all about. Hillary was the head of the State Department. She was traveling around the world communicating with all sorts of people, and she used her private email server. She had a server set up in her house, a secure server, and she only used her private email address to communicate with people. She didn't even have a State Department email address. Well, some people are worried, saying that that's against the rules. There's no, you're supposed to use official channels for communication, and she can now not reveal everything she said or everything she wrote, and she can conceal things. Well, this is just another case of people just making a big deal about nothing, being distracted by minutia, and really, frankly, being ignorant of how things work. Because number one, there's no rule against using your private email. Lots of people do it. Lots of politicians do it. Why? Because anyone who has a business or has a work email or personal email knows it gets to be a pain to juggle all these emails. And if you're an important person, you don't want to miss someone's email because you forgot to check the wrong one, or you checked the wrong one at the wrong time. And so it's a lot simpler and streamlined to use one email, an email you're already accustomed to using. So number two is we're talking about 50,000 emails. 50,000 emails. This to think that Hillary Clinton is going through 50,000 emails and trying to figure out one by one what she'll keep and what she'll hide, and trying to conceal this from public and from public release is just absurd to even consider, okay? It's like if you have a, this is where people really don't understand how things work. It's like if you have a security camera in your business and something happens, like for some reason you need to go back and see what happened. And say your business is open 10 hours in a day. If you go back and look through this videotape, it's going to take, even with fast forward, many hours to get through a 10-hour videotape. You can't just go through and pick and choose and, I'm going to go to exactly what happened. Unless you know exactly the time it happened or exactly what it was, then, there's no way to go back efficiently and try to figure this out after the fact. And we're talking about 50,000 emails. So if you go one by one, read each email one by one, it'll take over a year and a half to go through each email 24 hours a day. 24 hours nonstop, a year and a half to sort through 50,000 emails. Okay? So there's no way that Hillary Clinton is sitting there trying to figure out which email she's going to release and which email she's not going to release. It's just not going to happen. No one has time for that. No one is going to waste their lives for that, And the other thing about it that makes it ultimately extremely silly to even consider that as a possibility is that while there might be a secret agreement or a secret understanding that Hillary made with other heads of state around the world, there's no secret policy. Like you can't have you can't have things happen. Hillary Clinton is not making secret policy that we won't see the impact of. Sooner or later, it's going to show up. You can make a secret agreement, but when that actually, the rubber meets the road, when we have to perform on any agreement, then it's going to show up. People are going to see the outcome of these agreements. So it just doesn't make sense to assume that, and I guess Republicans will tell you, well, you can have secret policy and it's criminal and just like Benghazi, but it just strains credulity because it's the amount of effort required, and for people not to know, for some Senate committee not to be investigating and subpoenaing people, it's just a bunch of hullabaloo, a bunch of ado about nothing, another distraction. Don't get caught up in it. Don't believe the hype. Don't get fooled by the hyperbole. It's just a bunch of nonsense. She used her private server. It's not a big deal. Let's focus on what's really important. like voting, which brings me to the last segment today, which is why vote. And I've been hearing this a lot, I'm disappointed in Barack Obama, and Obama promised this, but he didn't do it, and Hillary is going to do this, even though she hasn't yet. And, I'm going to vote for the Green Party, or I'm going to vote for Libertarian. Folks, there has never in the history of the world been a third party elected to national office. It's not going to happen. The only hope for a third party anywhere in the world is in a parliamentary system which allots seats based on total number of votes, not necessarily a majority, and we do not have a parliamentary system here. So unless not only is it not going to be effective for you to vote for a third party for president or senate, and I highly, highly advise you not to do it. I'm all for a Green Party, and I'm all for liberal groups and liberal organizations, but you are not only is your vote not going to matter, you are actually going to be working against your own interests and probably helping Republicans to consolidate power in the courts and in the administration for generations to come. This is so important, especially 2016 coming up. There will probably be 1 or 2 Supreme Court appointments. And you do not want to fool around with Obama wasn't the ideal candidate. Listen, this guy is one guy. He's an administrator. His job is to run the government. He can't do everything. He can't accomplish everything overnight, and everything can't be done with the stroke of a pen. He's done quite a bit, but bottom line is, this isn't a popularity contest. This is about what's going to produce the best policy that you agree with. Okay, and trust me, voting a third-party candidate for president will not end up with that result. You will actually be working against your interests. It will be just as bad as a poor person in a Republican state voting for Republicans, voting against their own interests. Don't do it. People say, well, you take somebody like Florida was purple, Michigan they say is blue, California they say is blue, but these states are not blue. Don't be fooled. Understand how this things work, okay? These states, if you look at the local and the state elective office, they are Republican, and have been for decades. So how do you think the Republican Party can consolidate so much power, get so many votes? Because they win these local elected offices. They win in the county, they win in the cities, or not so much in the cities, but they win in the county, they win in the state legislature. These state legislatures now are almost, across the country are turning almost 100% Republican. I mean, really, they are run by Republicans. And these states are red. The grassroots are red. Why? Because the liberals don't come out and vote. The liberals want to split their vote with the Green Party or this party or that party. And what happens is that the Republicans consolidate power. They make legislation, local legislation. They make local policy. And then they have the winner effect. People want to back a winner. So people who make donations, people who contribute money, they know that the Republicans are going to get elected to office and they're going to be able to pass legislation. And that's going to benefit them. That's going to benefit the donor. So, what I say to people all the time, and I started saying this because Ralph Nader was coming out every 4 years, and it's just ridiculous, okay? Don't do this. Don't vote third party for your national representatives. Why? Because this is not going to happen. It never has happened. It never will happen. What you need to do is get some third-party candidates elected to your city government, elected to your county government. Start consolidating power on the grassroots level. Start influencing policy and influencing the minds of people in your community, directly your neighbors, people you live with in the city, people you live with in the county. And then once a Green Party candidate is able to get reelected, or several candidates are able to get elected, then you can start consolidating power. You can start gaining momentum. You can gather more donations. People will have faith that you will be able to accomplish something. But, you talk about, Rand Paul. If he got elected president, what would he accomplish? First of all, only a small faction of Congress is aligned with him, okay? So Democrats aren't, all the Republicans aren't. He will have no coalition. He will have no caucus. So what will he be able to accomplish? He will be at the whim, just like a George Bush, at the whim of his advisors, at the whim of the people who really have influence. So don't, this is just, it's just, I can't say it strongly enough. This is not a popularity contest. This is a policy contest. You may not think Hillary Clinton is the ideal candidate, but if you are liberal or you are progressive, then she's the best chance for the closest aspects of policy to what you believe. And if you don't vote for her, you are just working against your own interests. So don't do it. Work, be involved locally, be involved in your county and your city. Look for those candidates like Green Party candidates or independent candidates there. Support them. Go to a city council meeting, understand what's happening, and really know how things work, and then you know who to vote for. Okay, it's just participation is key, but let's not be silly. Okay, let's not make the perfect the enemy of the good. All right, so get out and vote. Get out and make sure you understand what's happening. And this is James Andre with your edition of TRP News. We'll be back next week. I want to thank you for watching, and take care.